So there are a couple things that we need to do before we get into KeyShot that we have to do inside of Cinema, and pretty much kind of like one of the advantages or the whole reason we're going to take this into a different program, which we'll be unfamiliar with, is because of how much faster it is. I think you guys will be pretty excited once you get in and once we see it today, kind of how much of an improvement it is over the experience rendering just with the basic Cinema 4D render. But like I said, there's a handful of things we've got to do here, so let's begin. And one of the first things we want to do is we want to take any of our cloners, any of our symmetry objects, and we want to make those editable. I've already undergone those steps, so I'm going to show you how my project is grouped up. So we had kind of the landing gear, which at one point was sweep, and then there was a symmetry on it. So I made that editable and I grouped it, so I've just got this landing gear group, and this has all of my landing gear stuff in it. Same thing with the camera holding bit. We've got this top piece of geometry, and then everything below this, so when I hide this one, you see everything down there disappears because it's all kind of grouped together. It all just kind of goes, and actually I don't need that, and I don't so this bevel, I will also need to make this bevel editable, because I have a bevel object on this. This is kind of the camera lens on my camera. You see it kind of looks a lot sharper and a lot more defined when I've got the bevel deformer checked on. So to make this editable, or so to say, I don't have to hit C because this is already a polygon. I've already made this editable, but the bevel object that's underneath it, I have to make that editable, and to do that I want to right click and go the current state to object. Yes. So the command current state to object makes a duplicate. There we go. And so this object, let me pull this over. So these are the same object, just one has a bevel deformer on it and one doesn't. So that one with the bevel deformer I can get rid of and turn the subdivision surface back on, turn my glass back on. That's all cool. So that's pretty simple. But then when it comes time to get to our rotors, and actually I combined my whole main body with the arms last class, I believe. So I took all these vertices and I did all that work to use the polygon pen tool and commands like merge and stuff to bring this all together. And you can see if I select like just one of these polygons and I do Control A, you'll see that this is all one nice big shape. So that's good. And the reason I did that is because if I open up my reference, this is all pretty much one big solid piece of plastic, or at least I'm going to assume. I don't have the absolute highest quality reference images, ever, but I would imagine that this part that connects to the arms is all kind of one part, and then the spinning part up here, that'll be separate, so we'll show that next. So as you can see, the main part of the body with the arm is down there, and then all this stuff, which is grouped. So this is everything that would spin. So if I kind of grab this and rotate this, that's a problem. So we'll fix that real quick. So screws. Okay, so I did skip this step, which I will not I want to correct that. So all these instances, I want to make these editable. And the reason is that's pretty important, because when you take a file like this into another program, it's not a guarantee that the two programs will kind of speak to each other correctly. Even though KeyShot is a 3D program and you can move stuff around and you can do some basic animation, there's kind of no guarantee that they're going to speak exactly the same language and everything is going to translate kind of perfectly. So we want to make sure that this is all grouped and all editable as much as possible. So these screws, so that thing I can delete, these screws, these can get grouped in with the main part of the body. So I'm going to group this main body, body. And I can type in my little search bar, because I know there's going to be a couple groups of those screws. And I can just type the word screw in. And this is like really one of the reasons I really stress naming stuff, because it would have been a lot more tedious for me to find all those objects and you know, kind of deal with them. And so now what I should be able to do is kind of open up each one of these. Wonderful. So these screws, all these different screw groups, screws, there we go. So all these, I can just select all these and then close my little search thing, and I should be able to just drag all these down into the main body group. Yeah. So now I've got all these different groups of screws, and that was a pretty quick way to deal with all this extra grouping and all these extra pieces of geometry. All right, so getting back to these groups now, where the rotors are. So like I said, just this right here is the only part that spins. We see now that nothing that shouldn't be moving or spinning is moving or spinning, which is what we want. And so I think at this point now, it all should be good, so I'm going to save. And we can move to the next step. So let's save this. So I have this Cinema 4D file saved, and if I type in KeyShot, so I open this up, and I'm just going to close these pop-ups. And right here in the Super More pop-up screen, I can click Import Model and go find my file. So drone version 5. And all of these settings should be good. I would just, if you're going to be following along with the tutorial, just kind of open this up and make sure your stuff it should be checked, everything the same as this. And I can click Import, and we see that it's almost all there. And I can navigate in this program the same way that I do in Cinema, and that's just holding Alt and using my different mouse buttons. It's all the same. And what you can see is this this program is interactively rendering. So what that means is you're seeing the render. This is what the file, this is what the JPEG or the TIFF or whatever I save out, this is what it will look like. Whereas when we're in Cinema 4D, this is not what the render, the render's not going to look like this. There's no like lighting or shadows or anything. Whereas in here, all that is present, and all you have to do is just kind of move around and give it a couple seconds, and it'll update. You can see that it kind of gets grainy each time I move around, and that is because it kind of takes a second to pick up. But I can zoom in kind of on all this, and I can see what all this detail is going to look like, which is pretty cool. But I think there are a couple little problems I still need to solve in this. And I believe that is because even the subdivision surfaces we need to make editable. So these nice subdivision surfaces that we used to make our propeller look nice and smooth, to give it that nice good curvature, we even have to make these editable. So I'm again going to type, I know what these are all named, so I'm going to type in propeller and just select all these and hit C to make these editable. That's all cool. And then I think as well on the body itself. So the main body, I'm going to want to make this editable as well. And I'm just going to save this out one more time. So version 6. And we'll just go to File, New, Discard, File, Import. We'll just bring in version 6. And there we go. So now we've got our propellers and our smoothed out body. So this is all looking good. But there is one last step that we missed, and it's kind of just a nuance right for keyshot. And basically what we need to do is, in Cinema 4D we have all of these objects grouped. So we have like this rotor group, all grouped. But in Keyshot, you almost want to think of the groups as different materials. So anything that would, for example, be, in my reference image, anything that would get this black plastic down here that's for the legs, or for kind of this camera holding stuff, I would want to apply one material to all of those different things, regardless of like what group they're in or what part of the object they're a part of. You want to apply a material to those. Same thing with like the white up here, and then the blades, and even going down to like the metal on the screws. So we're going to make a couple materials for that. And so this this metal that we had for this screw, we can just call this one screw metal. And then let's make a new material for the main body. Main body white. And you don't need to edit any of the like color or the reflectance or bump maps. You don't need to do any of that inside of Cinema. It's just simply applying the material to the right objects. So that way, once it comes into Keyshot, Keyshot's material system knows what is what, or like what each part should be, if that makes sense. So let's select the main body. So that's here, and we'll apply that white material. Let's do the propellers next. So we'll make one, and just to make it a little bit more visually obvious, I'll just make the black for the time being, and I will type in prop. So these are going to get this black. Name this one landing gear black. Make this one kind of a darker gray, sort of. Yeah, so these. That I'll want to make editable as well. So all of these will get this, or maybe not the camera. So these will all get a material. and then we'll make a camera material, and we'll just leave this one like maybe white, for example. We can add, we can kind of change it around once we get into KeyShot, but like I said, we just want to have placeholders, and this will be lens glass, because I did model a rough kind of like lens cap, not a lens cap, but the outer lens element. So this one, I'll just make this one like another medium gray. Apply that there. Apply that to that. Cool. So I think that should cover it for the most part. Just for the sake of this tutorial, I will kind of skip over this orange part. So that should be everything we need, I think. Alright, so I'm going to save this again one last time. And new, import version 7. That's all cool. Alright, and you can see that KeyShot is kind of just roughly interpreting these different colors. But like I said, we are going to want to kind of redo pretty much all of these. And you can see, so in KeyShot, let me just kind of go over the interface real briefly. On the left here is you have a bunch of presets. This is kind of like the content browser in Cinema. So this is where we'll find all of our different materials and all that fun stuff. And then obviously you've got the viewport in the middle. And then over on the right, this is kind of where in the Scene tab, this is kind of like the object menu, you know, where you see all your different objects. And then it's also got kind of the material editor and the attribute editor, you know, where you've got all your different sliders and lights and cameras and all that. It's all pretty much grouped together in this right panel. So with that being said, let's get started actually rendering and doing the materials. Oh, silly me. We forgot to animate it. So that's another thing we need to do. Our drone, an important part of our drone assignment is getting it to fly. And right now, it doesn't fly. Nothing happens. So that shouldn't take us too long. Alright, so I'm just going to animate from the top level group, kind of where everything is grouped together, and I can just, at this point I can probably just delete my old folder, just kind of where my backup pieces go. So I think about 5 seconds will be a good amount of time. So that's 150 frames in this case. And oops. Control B, not Control N. So I'm just gonna set up my output. This isn't the most important, but I just still want to get kind of an idea of what my camera angle is going to be. So I guess at 0 it will start on the ground, presumably, and it won't lift off immediately, because if you think, or if you've ever like kind of watched one of these turn on, much like a helicopter, the blades have to spin up for a little while and get up to speed, and then it can generate the lift and come up off the ground. So it's not going to immediately just zip up in the air and fly away. We're gonna probably come out to maybe frame 40, 45, something like that, and it'll still be on y coordinate 0, and then I think from here it will come up, and I'm actually gonna keyframe all of these, I think. Yeah. So I'm keyframing all three position and all three rotation values. And then we'll just kind of pull this ahead. And this isn't an exact science by any means. Just something that kind of looks right. And for the most part, these drones don't take off perfectly flat. Like, they usually kind of wobble a little bit while they first come into the air. And so we're just going to rotate this ever so slightly. Nothing too much, just a couple percent in any direction. And then we'll come forward a little bit more, pull this up a little bit more, rotate it just a little bit differently. And then from here, I think it'll really start to get going. You can add cool sound effects with your mouth, like if you really want. Feel free to record yourself and add the audio in After Effects at the end. I think that'll be pretty good. We pretty much just need it to fly off. Oops. I forgot to slide to the end. Like I said, it doesn't need to go that far. It basically just needs to kind of lift up off the ground and look like it's going to fly off camera. So let's wind this back and just check out what we've made. That looks pretty good. And now the propellers, we'll worry about the propellers in a second. I'm pretty much just looking at the body. I think that looks pretty good. One little adjustment I want to make is I want to pull it forward a little bit more, just to give it the implication that it's got a little bit more momentum than I first gave it. And so this keyframe right here, yeah, I think I want it to be a little bit further forward. So I'm just going to kind of click and drag this just a little bit. And this is, at least to me, a little bit easier to going in the side views and moving the keyframes kind of visually, as opposed to just like kind of dragging it and pulling it around and re-keyframing it over and over again. I think that's a pretty effective way to animate this. And then there's one last thing that we want to make sure, and hopefully, if you guys remember, a while back I kind of drew a rough animation of like what a timing example looks like on the board, just using kind of these dotted lines. And we can see that towards the end here, and this is because of Cinema 4D's default setting, it's actually slowing down. So you can see that these dots are evenly spaced, and then over here they're starting to get closer and closer. And what this is it's position each frame. So what this is telling you over here is it's actually slowing down, and we can see this if we just kind of zoom in on our timeline. We can see that it goes real fast, and it's almost like it's parking, like right at the very end there, which wouldn't make sense. If this thing was like at full blast, you know, capable of flying away, it wouldn't be slowing down. So we're going to open up the timeline, if I can find it. Yeah, the timeline. And the last thing, or what we want to do, is we want to hit frame all. And what is happening right here in these animation curves is you can pretty much see what I just described, where this is starting to, it's going on a really steady pace, and then here it levels off. So we want to grab this Bezier handle on this animation and pull it down, not like straight down like this way, because that won't be correct either, but kind of in the middle, almost like it's following along the curve itself. And that should be all we need. So now if we rewatch this, It's not really slowing down. It's going at a steady clip, which is what we want. All right, so now we can save and get back to KeyShot. We can do the propeller rotation in KeyShot. It wouldn't be as effective to animate that whole flying sequence just because KeyShot doesn't have a timeline like what we were just in. Oops. This timeline. Because KeyShot is it's good at some things and it's good at some things and it's less good at other applications. Just like any kind of tool, you know, it's got pros and cons. And its pro is that it renders fast, and its con is that it doesn't have a robust animation setup. But we can do some stuff, and rotating, or like a constant rotation, like the propellers, is definitely something that we can do in it. So I will just make a new scene for the last time, and then import this. And so now, if we click the animation button, we get a timeline that looks like, you know, a timeline that we are familiar with, and we can play. And it, like I said, it's going to be pretty blurry, so it's a little hard to see exactly kind of what we've got. But if we come up to lighting, we can go to performance mode, and this will turn basically each of these different presets turns features on and off in order. It's kind of like a weight, like you've got like either really good quality and slow performance, or really fast performance and kind of lower quality. So on performance mode, it will turn off almost everything that it can, and it will show it flying up in a bit better quality. And so before we get going on the materials and all that fun stuff, we can get the propellers animated, and that shouldn't be too tricky. So in our model group, so over here in the scene tab, we want to kind of dig through this models menu. Is pretty much everything we brought in from Cinema. So we want to go into the Rotors group and go into this rotor group. This should be everything. So if we right click here on our selected rotor group, we can go to animation and then rotation. And in the timeline, this added a new track, kind of like in After Effects when you've got your different layers, and then you've got a timeline. So you can see this thing over here is spinning, but it's not spinning in the right axis. But that's not too hard to change. But before we change the axis it's spinning in, we want to make sure that we extend this animation track for the full duration of our scene, because otherwise it'll stop spinning, and that's definitely not what we want. So we can just go to this rotation little area, and I think Y is the axis we want. Yep. So that's spinning in the right direction, but it's not enough. So I'm just going to type in 3000 because that sounds like a good number. Because this is the total number of degrees it will rotate over the course. It's not like a speed, like an RPM or whatever. So we pretty much just have to just kind of guess. So that might be a little slow, actually. So that looks good for an up to speed, maybe a little too fast. Let's do 4500, split the difference. Because we will have motion blur and some other stuff on, that'll definitely make this look like it's spinning, regardless of kind of exactly what speed it is. I'm not a propeller scientist, so I don't know what number is actually appropriate. But I do know that this wouldn't get up to speed immediately. It would have a period of it kind of ramping up to speed, like from 0 up to its kind of its max. So what I want to go is on the time setting, and I want to click motion ease, because right now it's on linear, and I want to select ease in. And what this will do is it will mean that it's going to kind of get going and then ramp all the way up.
I think it needs to get going faster.
So I think that looks pretty good. And now we can apply that same animation to the other propellers. And now it's a little hard to see because this is pretty cramped on this monitor. But you can see that we have the rotor group, or we have the rotor group right here, and then we have, this is a new object that Keyshot made, and this is almost like the animation itself is being listed in our objects list, and we've got a little check mark, and we can turn the check mark off, and you can see that that's no longer spinning, which is kind of neat. So this object right here is where all of our animation is present, and we can right click it and go to copy, and then close up that one and select rotor group number 2 and go to animation, paste animation, and you can see in the timeline that that made another track. So now we've got two tracks. So I'm going to paste that to number 3. And number 4. And so that looks pretty good. But one thing to note, and that is on at least most drones, and by most I mean everyone that I have recognized, the propellers, the ones next to each other, they spin opposite of each other. So like propeller number 1 and propeller number 3, they spin, like for example clockwise, and then this one and this one spin counterclockwise, and that is so that they get the right amount of lift or something. So what I need to do is take say this one and this one, or maybe just click them one at a time, and I can type in a minus on the first one and the third one to make these negative. And so now that looks pretty cool, except for they're all exactly synchronized, which is pretty improbable. So I can just kind of fudge these numbers a little bit. So maybe that one's minus 4,500. Let's try like 4,250. So I'm just going to give these kind of slightly different numbers. 46. Literally just making up numbers that are pretty similar, because you don't want them to look like they're spinning like too drastically different, but you want to give them just a little bit of variance. And so now, once it gets going, they're all kind of different, and they no longer.
What's it doing at the end there? Why does it look like it's randomly?
That is a good question. It's almost like it's crashing into a wall.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Everything's crashing into a wall.
I think I know why. Okay, so you remember how I said that not everything is going to translate from one program to another, because they talk similar but not identical languages to each other. The problem is that we've got 6 keyframes right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what we should have is 150 keyframes. We should have a keyframe every frame that tells, basically forces Keyshot to recognize every frame exactly where the drone should be. And to do that is not a hard It's not a hard command, but it is easy to miss. So with the drone all selected, and with all of these selected, so I just marqueed everything, I want to go to, in the timeline, Functions, Bake Objects. And so bake is one, it's a fun word. But in 3D, or in the context of 3D, basically what it's going to do is it's going to kind of lock in every frame what it's doing. And as you progress through the 3D program and eventually into the field, you will hear the word bake used in pretty much every context. Animation, rendering, lighting, dynamics, like everything. So when you click bake, you get a pretty awesome pop-up menu, and you, in this case, will probably want to uncheck create copy, because what this is going to do is it's going to duplicate your object. And we don't really want a duplicate because we don't want to send 2 drones to Keyshot. We want 1 drone. But everything else in this case is fine, because all we did was we animated position and rotation, and that's cool. We don't need anything else, and the frames are from 0 to 150, which is exactly what we wanted. And you'll see that instead of having 6 nice and pretty keyframes, we've got 150 seemingly ugly, a mess of a timeline. But that's good, because basically what this means now is that there is no room for mistranslation when we go from cinema to Keyshot. And actually what it did is it missed this beginning because there wasn't a difference. So we're gonna still want to open up this timeline and come over to this. So right now the button we're in is the second button up here, which is called the F curve. Yeah, F curve mode. We want to jump over to the dope sheet, because this is a slightly different view. So this view is almost kind of like our timeline, like kind of like what we're used to looking at down here, sorta, kinda. But what we can do is copy this first keyframe, because we know that it's supposed to be at 0 here, and it's supposed to be at 0 here. We can just duplicate the keyframe of 0, just every frame through here. So just select that one, come over to frame 1, Control V, nope. I think I have to, yeah, I have to Control, click, and drag. So what I'm just doing is I'm just holding Control and clicking and dragging 1 frame at a time, and then once I get a couple going, I can just duplicate a bunch at once. Sweet, I can count good. So now we've got keyframes on every frame, and we can resave. And I wonder if this will update. I doubt it. Update. Who knows if this will work? So let's just kind of back up and see if it does its thing. It still is like kind of crashing. Maybe there's an invisible wall there. I'm not really sure. I haven't used Keyshot enough to know if there might be kind of like a boundary. It's like too big. I don't really know. But I know that we can frame our camera angle in a way to hide this mistake. So I will just progress from here, I think. Alright, so we can finally now get to the fun part. Alright, so let's go to environments. Oh, up here. Okay, so If you guys remember in the product assignment, I used the content browser to find what was called an HDR, kind of an image to wrap around my scene. This has an even more extensive kind of preset library of these kind of backgrounds. So we can just go up to the Environments tab, and for the purpose of the still render, which is what we'll do first, because we're doing one large still and then one smaller animation. For the purpose of the still, we will use a studio light, and we can just scroll through here, and you should just be able to drag and drop, just kind of right from there, and bring it into here and kind of see what it's going to start looking like. So that one's literally all black. We don't want that one. We want to be able to see something, probably. So I don't want to spend too long looking for something, but this one looks pretty wild. I think it's a little too dark. Alright, I think we'll just go with this one for now. And let's jump to back to materials, and we can close up the animation, at least for the time being. Or maybe let's get to an interesting frame where our rotors are all going. Cool. Alright, good enough. So it's like kind of up in the air. This is kind of like an action pose sort of thing. One thing before I get too far down the rabbit hole of doing my texturing is I want to set up my render resolution. And so the viewport, what we're seeing right here, the size in here is everything that is going to render. So and right now it is not in a size or an aspect ratio that we kind of want. Our drone, or at least in the pose that I've got, it's kind of wider than it is taller. So I'm going to choose a landscape one, and this sounds 2560 by 1600. Sounds like a good resolution for a large render. So something like this is kind of sweet, I think. Alright, so let's start playing with materials. So I think this outer part is going to be a plastic. So we can go to the plastics and probably a hard plastic, probably shiny. And so these are just kind of preset colors, but we can just take this white one and drag it onto the white, kind of onto the body. And in the material tab up here, eventually we should figure out which one that is. Yeah, so this was hard, shiny plastic. And if I double click this one, I can open up the setting here and maybe play with the roughness. And here you can rechange the change the color somewhere. I don't want to mess with it too much. Or just pick a different color from the preset. So let's just jam through this, I think. So I'm going to find a metal for the landing gear, perhaps. Polished aluminum sounds cool. So if I apply that to the landing leg, so if I just have to mouse over and drag and drop, that might be maybe too reflective. maybe we will go with a plastic, because I do want it to match, oops, I want it to match my reference. So this doesn't look like a very shiny, oh, actually it is pretty shiny. Yeah, so we'll go with the hard shiny black plastic for the landing legs. And you can see, because of the way that we had our material group set up, that applied it to the landing legs and to the camera holder, kind of all at once. So let's grab this one and apply this one to the camera body. And I remembered that I wanted a piece of glass for my camera lens. So we can open up a clear glass, refractive. That sounds pretty cool. You can just drag and drop that right onto so if I were to, there we go, we can see it kind of reflecting off the camera lens. If I spent a little bit more time modeling and really getting in all this different detail, I could get all these different parts to my camera. At least for the sake of the lecture, I'm just going to leave this all kind of one solid chunk. But I would recommend that you guys, if given the time, would try to make it a little bit maybe more accurate than I did. And I'm not sure if this actually is carbon fiber, but it kind of looks like maybe fake carbon fiber for the propellers. So we're going to try to maybe use the carbon fiber preset material for our propellers. That sounds cool, if it looks like what it should. That looks pretty cool. So if I think I want to kind of adjust the scale just ever so slightly, because this looks like a little bit finer of a pattern than than what is present in here. So I just jumped over to the textures, and I think I'm going to try to scale this down to maybe 0.1 instead of 0.2. Yeah, there we go. No idea how much of this will actually show up in the render, but it's never a bad idea to try. So I might brighten this up, just kind of adjust this a little bit, and this is what at least personally, I think is kind of the fun part of rendering stuff. Just kind of being able to play around, and because it updates so fast, you don't have to wait around for ages to kind of see what this stuff is going to look like. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. I think I'll just leave that for now. So this is probably the same hard plastic as what is on the white, or what is on the body, I should say. And we can apply that there. And let's grab, I think the last material we need is the metal for the little screws and stuff. So we can grab that aluminum. And it doesn't seem to want to cooperate. So I can just go into my scene, and if I type screw, there we go. Nope. Kind of zoom in here to make sure it's all white right now, so it's kind of hard to see kind of what I've got. So there we go. So that is applied to those, but it's not. What did I name these up here? a really useful command that I don't think I've showed you guys yet, but I use all the time to find stuff in a really jumbled up kind of hierarchy. If you can see it and select it in the viewport, you can go to Edit. Where is it? Edit. View. Yeah, View. Scroll to First Active, and this will open up it'll open up all your groups until you get right to that object. And so this was called carriage bolt. So that was probably kind of the content browser name. So if I search bolt, nope. Sweet. So we'll just open these up because the search doesn't want to cooperate. And just drag and drop this onto each carriage bolt group. There we go. So I think that should be all the materials I needed. Close that up. Give ourselves a little bit more room. So I think this is a little bit too bright. We're pretty much missing kind of like the whole top half of our drone. It's pretty much all just blown out because of how bright it is. So I think I'm going to play with the contrast and stuff on my HDR. Maybe just adjust the brightness and stuff a little bit. I can raise this scale value or size value to simulate that it's in a kind of a larger room, so to speak. And I'm going to turn my rendering mode back up to full simulation, and maybe not full, maybe product. Okay. Yeah, we want those on. Okay. Render motion blur. There we go. So the motion blur was under the render little setting right here. So I checked on motion blur. So this is a lot of motion blur. It's like crazy shaky cam from some crappy movie amount of motion blur. And I forget where we lower this. Alright, so I've made some adjustments to my render. I've got a camera angle that I'm pretty happy with, and I've got it positioned in a way that I find pleasing. So I think I'm ready to render. At least I feel like I'm ready to render. So we can set up our image output. So to do that, our render settings, you come up to render, and then you click the render button, which will open up the render settings. And the resolution that I had set in the interactive render was 2560 by 1600. Cool. And so this is just a still image. This is just our one nice high quality still. So we're gonna set this to TIFF for example, because TIFF is a pretty nice file format. And I'm going to name this and make sure it goes into a folder that is logical, so not some random folder on the C drive. Into my folder, renders. So this will go, yeah, so that's cool. And then I'm going to name this something that I will recognize. And in my options, so this is an important button right here, our samples. This is basically our overall quality button. So for the purpose of the still image, we will want to crank this up a good amount so that it's super good quality, pretty much as clear and noise-free as possible. So 256 is a good value, I think. And we can add that to the, add that to the queue. So if I save, render, yeah, that should all be set. I should be able to add, so this is just a still image, I think. Might have to do these one at a time. I think I'm just going to do them one at a time. So I'm going to delete job. Yeah. So I would, if I click render, so if I click render, it will begin. So it's going to do its thing. And it'll spend a long time on, or not a long time, but a pretty good amount of time on just this one image. I'm actually going to cancel it because I need to at least show you guys how to set up the animation render. So in your situation, you would let this run all the way through. So then to do an animation, we want to go to the animation tab, and we don't want a video output, we just want a frame output. And so I will name this drone animation render. Put this in here, and inside my renders folder I'm just going to make another one, sequence, if I can spell. So that's all good. So this will give me my render, my TIFF sequence that I can load into After Effects and make my MP4 to turn in, which is the second part of the assignment. And so for the animation, I think we want to maybe set up the environment a little bit differently, because we have our camera set up. So I'm going to save as, so that's drone render, and this will be drone render animation, because I'm going to actually change a couple things in my scene here. So one thing that will be important for the animation is to turn off motion blur, because that is just going to be a little bit too taxing on our system. And I did a super cool Dutch angle on my camera for my still, so I'm going to turn that off probably. And I think for the animation I want to maybe not do a studio, maybe let's see if we can find an outdoor or some other setting that has like kind of a real feel to it. So we can just drag and drop that, and we can look around and we're in some sort of room of some sort, and it kind of almost looks realistic even just like this. And so in our environment, I think I want to adjust the size of the room a little. And then I'm going to want to play my animation and make sure that my camera angle catches my drone flying away, but not flying and getting stuck on the invisible wall, because
Or you should put it up against the wall.
it kind of just derps out, like right here. It just is like, not so much.
It's a force field.
Yeah, yeah, it's a force field.
I'm telling you, man, just line it up with your environment so it's actually hitting the wall.
So I'm going to try to figure out what frame everything goes off the rails. I think that's this frame right here. And I can slide my time slider and just end these, trim these animations right at this frame, because I won't need to render, if I want to hide all this stuff, there's no, come on. There's no sense rendering these frames if I know, like from the start, that I don't even want to ever see them because they're bad. So let's end this on a frame where it looks like it's kind of going off screen. So let's pull this back. Alright, so I gotta aim my camera down a little bit more. Pull this up here. Alright, so I need to go a little bit more down this way. And I can adjust my camera settings some more. Might pull this down. My focal length, I had it on 50, so I think I want to go a little bit wider just so that I can see a little bit more for the animation. Yeah, so I think this is good. Yeah, this is pretty good. And this is a sort of boring part of my background, so I'm just going to select the background and rotate this. That window and stuff looks kind of nice. I can turn ground reflections on because, at least in this one, I have a ground. Don't want to check that. That was scary. I'm not sure what ground size is doing, but yeah, ground shadows and ground reflections, because we can see a little bit of the white kind of reflecting of the drone, which is nice. Yeah, that looks pretty good, I'd say. So this, I think we're cool. I'm gonna save this project and just go back to render, make sure my settings are all still good. So my resolution, I definitely want to change to what we will render in this class, and that is 960 by 540, and it seems to be locked. 960 by 540. Interesting. Okay, so I think that is under image. Nope. I'm gonna uncheck the lock. And it broke. Okay. Sometimes this program does that when it's maximized. So you just unmaximize it and kind of drag it, and hopefully it comes back to life. And then it's fighting me. So I'm gonna pause the render so that it kind of stops trying to update for me, and see if that, nope. So that's 960, that's 540. There we go. So now when I re-maximize the program,
It changed.
yeah, so it changed my framing a little bit. So I'm gonna,
Changed your resolution when you maximized your window.
yeah. But what's weird is,
That's just telling you what it's showing you right now.
yeah, so when I have the program unmaximized and I can make it whatever size I want, it will respect the resolution that I typed in. But when I maximize it, because this is a low-res monitor, it's the same proportion, which is what's important. Because now when I come up to render, And it still is not being nice. Interesting. Huh. Okay. I see how it is.
Can you make a custom map?
I can try custom, edit custom. So we're going to click the plus, 960 by 540. Okay. Bam. So now, hey, look at that. I think it's working now. So, yeah, editing in a custom resolution was the ticket. That was exactly what we wanted. So because I'm clipping mine a little short, because mine kind of bugged out at the end, I want to do work area and not entire duration, because there's no business, no point rendering these extra 15 frames, it looks like, because they're gonna look weird. So why even spend the time on them, I say. So, alright, let's jump back to the options. So in the render resolutions, we can lower this a bit to, let's try maybe 128. So we'll do half the samples. And this is just kind of a computer thing. A value like this you want to leave in a multiple of 8. So 64, 128, 256, so on and so forth. If you type in like 130, I can't promise what will happen. You'll break something. Maybe, who knows. But just do like 128 or 256 or whatever. If it goes too slow for you, you can lower this again by like half. But we're going to try 128. And my output is set up. It's going into the right folder, and it's a TIFF. And this should all be good. So we're going to click render. And this will do its thing for each frame. You've got a progress bar for each frame, so this looks like it's going pretty quick, I'd say. So that'll conclude it. You will then pull these into After Effects once they're done. At least the animation, I should say, you'll bring that into After Effects and render that out as a movie. If you want to be a go-getter, you can do a little bit of color correction using the adjustment layers in After Effects, because this is a movie. Or you can color correct your still image in Photoshop. I definitely wouldn't want you guys to shy away from doing some stuff like that if you want. And then just turn in, I'll make a turn in folder. So you'll have one H.264 movie file, and then one TIFF, which is the big still frame that are of the resolutions that I've pointed out here. And that'll be it. Just make sure you have your name and all that labeled before you copy it onto the server, because a couple people have realized that from your machines, once you put something onto the server, you can't edit the name. So if you just give me render 1 through render 150, I'm not going to know who's named render. It's got to have your name on it. So that'll conclude this.